Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. The war spreads as Iranian missiles kill and injure civilians in Tel Aviv, while Yemen's Houthis launch their first attack on Israel. At least 2 people were killed and 11 others injured in a Russian drone attack on Odessa overnight. And Pope Leo XIV makes his first European trip, visiting Monaco, nearly 500 years after the last papal visit. The conflict between Israel, the United States and Iran is now showing new signs of spreading across the region. Fresh missile attacks, US troop casualties and a possible new front from Yemen are raising concerns. The war could widen even as Washington says it may end within weeks.
The war between Israel, the United States and Iran is intensifying, with new attacks hitting central Israel. Early Saturday, Iran launched a multi-warhead missile toward the country. Israeli authorities say 1 person was killed and 4 others injured after fragments struck areas around Tel Aviv. Emergency teams were deployed across the region following the impact. According to the Israeli military, the attacks came in quick succession, first targeting southern Israel, followed by central areas within less than half an hour. Air defense systems were activated as sirens sounded across large parts of the country. At the same time, the conflict appears to be widening beyond Israel and Iran. Israel says it detected a missile launch from Yemen, the first since the war began after Iran-aligned Houthi forces warned they could enter the conflict. The war is also directly impacting US forces in the region. US official says 12 American troops were wounded, 2 of them seriously, in an Iranian strike on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. In total, more than 300 US service members have been wounded since late February, with 13 reported killed.
We are on or ahead of schedule in that operation and expect to conclude it at the appropriate time here in a matter of weeks, not months, and the progress is going very well.
The latest developments show the conflict is spreading beyond a single front. Attacks are continuing and more areas are being drawn into the fighting.
Tensions in the Strait of Hormuz are escalating as security concerns disrupt global shipping and raise fears over energy supplies. 2 Chinese container ships failed to exit the Gulf despite Iranian assurances of safe passage. Meanwhile, the United Nations has established a task force to safeguard critical supply routes through the strategic waterway.
2 Chinese container ships operated by COSCO Shipping turned back after attempting to exit the Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz, despite Iran stating that vessels from countries not allied with the United States and Israel, including China, would be allowed to pass. The failed transit comes as Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has warned that shipping linked to US and Israeli partners would face restrictions, adding to uncertainty over access to the waterway and underscoring persistent security risks along the route. US President Donald Trump said negotiations are underway and called for the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened, at one point jokingly referring to it as the Strait of Trump.
They are negotiating. They're begging to make a deal. They're begging to make a deal. Turned out I was right. They were negotiating, which they admitted 2 days later. And in order to make up for their misstatement, they said, we're going to send you 8 ships of oil. And the following day I saw, this is 2 days ago, I saw on one of the networks, very strange, there were 8 ships of oil coming out of Iran. And then they actually said, we're going to add an extra 2. And they added an extra 2, so we had 10 ships. And then people realized we were actually negotiating. And we're negotiating now, and it'd be great if we could do something, but they have to open it up. They have to open up the Strait of Hormuz.
Amid these developments, the United Nations has established a task force to develop a mechanism aimed at maintaining critical supply flows through the Strait of Hormuz.
The primary focus of this task force is to develop and propose technical mechanisms specifically designed to meet humanitarian needs in the Strait of Hormuz, drawing inspiration from relevant UN initiatives, including the UN Verification, Inspection, Monitoring Mechanism for Yemen, the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and the existing 2720 mechanism for Gaza. This new mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz aims to facilitate fertilizer trade, including the movements of raw materials. The mechanism's operationalization will be done in close consultation with relevant member states, with full respect for national sovereignty and established international legal frameworks.
The United Nations says the mechanism will depend on broad international backing and could contribute to wider diplomatic efforts to ease the crisis. Maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has fallen sharply since the conflict began, declining from around 150 daily crossings to just a handful. The slowdown has disrupted global energy flows, halting shipments of Saudi crude and Qatari liquefied natural gas. Hundreds of vessels remain held up across the Gulf, with around 20,000 seafarers still awaiting safe passage.
The war in Iran is now having a growing global impact beyond the battlefield. From rising fuel prices to supply shortages, governments and consumers are already feeling the pressure.
The US-Israeli war with Iran is pushing up global energy prices and disrupting supply chains across multiple regions. Much of the pressure is linked to instability around key energy routes, including the Strait of Hormuz, a major corridor for global oil and gas shipments. In the United States and Europe, fuel prices have risen, prompting increased demand and government responses. European governments have introduced measures to manage the impact.
The German government and the German parliament have thus acted swiftly, decisively and proportionately. We are now limiting petrol stations to raising prices only once a day. We are strengthening the cartel office by reversing the burden of proof. Oil companies must now demonstrate why they are raising prices and what their pricing structure is.
While Slovenia has imposed caps on fuel purchases, Spain has also introduced support measures, including tax reductions and subsidies to ease pressure on households.
We are going to reduce electricity taxes by 60%. We are going to suspend the production tax, lowering the special tax to 0.5%, and we are going to reduce VAT on electricity from 21% to 10%.
Beyond Europe, the effects are being felt in transport and daily livelihoods. Airlines have introduced fuel surcharges amid supply concerns linked to disruptions in key shipping routes. In Somalia, rising fuel costs have forced some drivers to stop working, affecting incomes.
Obviously, if fuel availability is affected, running out of fuel is going to have a major impact on all businesses, because you're grounded with immediate effect. And then also pricing, you might just not fly because the pricing just gets out of hand and it becomes unaffordable for most people that travel. That will have a major impact, grounding our fleet.
In Asia, governments are taking steps to manage supply risks. Japan has announced plans to use strategic reserves, while Sri Lanka has introduced fuel rationing measures. India has also faced shortages of cooking gas, leading to protests linked to supply disruptions. Analysts say the situation highlights the global economy's dependence on stable energy supply routes, with continued disruption likely to keep pressure on prices and supply.
A Russian overnight strike in Odessa damaged a maternity hospital, left 2 people dead and 11 injured, including a child. The attack forced many residents to leave their homes and also hit homes, a television centre and other infrastructure, with fires later extinguished. Emergency teams worked under repeated air raid alerts, and the strike follows previous attacks on Odessa's ports, which damaged grain-carrying vessels and disrupted exports, highlighting the ongoing threat to the city and global food supplies. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has rejected claims by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that Washington is linking security guarantees to Kyiv giving up the Donbas region. Rubio described those comments as a lie, saying security guarantees would only be discussed after the war comes to an end.
That's a lie. And I saw him say that, and it's unfortunate he would say that because he knows that's not true, and that's not what he was told. What he was told is the obvious. Security guarantees are not going to kick in until there's an end to a war, because otherwise you're getting yourself involved in the war. Okay, what is a security guarantee? It is troops that are willing to step in and secure. If you put that in place now, that means you're injecting yourself in the war. What he was told very clearly, and he should have understood it, is that the security guarantees come only after there is an end to the war. But that was not attached to unless he gives up territory. I don't know why he says these things. They're just not true.
Protesters and trade union members gathered in central Athens to demonstrate against Greece's military spending and call on the government to stay out of the war involving Iran. The demonstration took place in Syntagma Square and was organised by major labour groups, including the Civil Servants Union and a communist affiliated movement. Participants chanted anti-war slogans and held banners opposing any military involvement. Organisers said the rally forms part of a wider mobilisation against rising defence spending, arguing that public funds should instead be directed towards wages and social services. Pope Leo arrives in Monaco, marking his first visit to Europe since becoming pontiff. The trip comes nearly 5 centuries after the last papal visit to the Mediterranean Principality. During the one-day program, he will offer prayers at the Cathedral of Our Lady Immaculate and celebrate Mass at a local stadium before returning to the Vatican. The visit carries special significance, highlighting Monaco's close ties to the Holy See and the Principality's strong Catholic heritage, despite being the world's second smallest country after Vatican City.
Thank you.
US President Donald Trump has hinted that Cuba could be the next focus of US policy, telling a crowd in Miami Cuba is next, as he praised recent military actions abroad. The remark, delivered partly in a joking tone before being repeated, did not include any specific plans, but is being seen as a signal of potential increased pressure on Havana.
Well, you know, when I went into Venezuela, I said, because I campaigned on the fact peace through strength, you wouldn't have to use. I built this great military. I said, you'll never have to use it, but sometimes you have to use it. And Cuba's next, by the way, but pretend I didn't say that, please. Pretend I didn't say that. Please, 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 media, please disregard that statement. Thank you very much.
The US House of Representatives has passed a temporary bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security through May 22nd. The measure was approved by a narrow vote of 213 to 203. It now heads to the Senate, where it is expected to face opposition from Democrats. The vote comes after House Republicans rejected a bipartisan deal to end a 6-week partial government shutdown, prolonging disruptions, including long lines at US airports. Golf superstar Tiger Woods has been released after being arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence following a crash in Florida. Authorities say his Land Rover overturned after clipping a work truck while overtaking on a 2-lane road near his home in Jupiter Island. He was held for at least 8 hours, as required under Florida law, before posting bail. It is his second DUI-related case after a 2017 arrest and follows a serious crash in 2021 in which he suffered multiple leg injuries. China and the IAEA have agreed to deepen nuclear cooperation, focusing on safe and sustainable energy for developing nations. Al-Mahnur Maktoum has more.
China and the International Atomic Energy Agency have pledged to deepen cooperation during a meeting in Beijing, aiming to support sustainable energy development across the global south. Officials said that the partnership will focus on enhancing nuclear safety, technical training, and infrastructure development, providing developing countries with clean and reliable energy solutions. The move shows China's a growing role in global governance and its overall strategy to strengthen South-South cooperation. By promoting nuclear technology as a low-carbon energy source, Beijing aims to help emerging economies meet rising energy demand while reducing reliance on fossil fuels, contributing to global climate goals. Specific programs include training initiatives and technical assistance projects in countries seeking to expand peaceful nuclear energy use. The IAEA welcomed the enhanced collaboration, emphasizing the importance of safety, security, and adherence to safeguards in all nuclear activities. Both sides highlighted that the initiative will focus strictly on the peaceful use of nuclear energy, supporting developing nations in addressing energy shortages while advancing sustainable development and climate action targets. Man Mukhtim, A-News, Beijing.
Foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Egypt are set to visit Islamabad for talks on regional tensions as diplomatic efforts intensify across the Middle East. The meetings scheduled for March 29th and the 30th will focus on coordination and possible steps to reduce escalation. The visit brings together key regional players at a time of growing instability, with discussions also expected on broader cooperation. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif announced Friday that the government will absorb billions in fuel costs to shield consumers from rising global oil prices linked to Middle East tensions. The move follows an earlier decision in March to raise petrol and diesel prices due to higher costs driven by the Iran conflict, a step that fueled inflation and hit the country's poorest citizens.
The world is currently going through an extraordinary and extremely difficult situation. We had already begun preparations to confront this storm. Under our austerity and simplicity drive, we cut 100 billion rupees from the development budget for strategic projects. And by saving every penny, dedicated billions of rupees to reduce the economic pressure on the common man. Today in Pakistan, the price of petrol should have been 544 rupees per litre, but you are getting it for only 322 rupees. Similarly, the price of diesel in Pakistan today should have been 790 rupees per litre. Yet the government is providing diesel to you at only 335 rupees per litre, so that no further burden falls on you.
Hundreds of protesters gathered in Ankara opposing the reported closure of Al-Aqsa Mosque for Muslim prayers. Israeli authorities closed the site on the 28th of February following the outbreak of hostilities, with restrictions extended through important religious holidays for Muslims. Crowds marched through the capital carrying banners in support of the site, chanting religious slogans as they called for access to be restored. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also criticised the move, saying the right to pray at Al-Aqsa cannot be restricted. Istanbul hosts the 5th International Strategic Communications Summit, bringing together global experts and officials to discuss key challenges in strategic communication. The event focuses on the evolving role of communication in today's shifting geopolitical landscape.
The 2026 International Strategic Communications Summit is being held under the theme Disruption in the International System, Crisis, Narratives and the Search for Order. The summit provides a platform to discuss the role of strategic communication and the rising tensions and structural shifts in the global order. And since 2021, Stratcom has brought together politicians, academics, media professionals, and communication experts from over 50 countries, fostering extensive dialogue on crisis communication, disinformation, public diplomacy, emerging technologies, and media skills.
At the global governance, I think the most important thing is that the world needs to sit together, they need to engage, and they need to utilize the platforms which are there for communication to end the conflict. Because at the end of the day, we are facing multiple crises. Either this is a crisis of the breakdown of international law, either this is a question of the breakdown of the humanitarian support which needs to go to the conflict areas. And we are seeing that over the period of time, the wars are increasing. So international order is breaking down. The nations are not respecting sovereignty. The territorial integrity is at risk. So I think that's where we need to work, because in the last few years, we have seen so many wars. Either this is India, Pakistan, Iran, Middle East, either it is in Ukraine, Russia. So I think that's where they need to work. They need to sit together. They need to look for the future. And I think that's my point is, here comes the question of middle power movement, where countries like Pakistan, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and many others, they can work together to bring together nations and to bridge the gap between the great powers and the middle powers.
This fight against disinformation, misinformation,
Climate issues were also highlighted with discussions linking Stratcom to COP31 and new priorities in climate diplomacy. This year's focus goes beyond the reducing carbon emissions to include sustainable solutions for countries and communities most affected by climate change. Key priorities include fair and inclusive approaches, crisis and adaptation strategies, strengthen global cooperation, and the promotion of green technologies. The summit emphasized that justice in communication can play a crucial role in restoring global peace, trust, and stability, while COP31 aims to facilitate more equitable, sustainable, and inclusive climate policies. Nuray Mustafa, Avaz Hacıyev for A News, Istanbul, Turkey.
A senior United Nations official has warned that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is being overshadowed by other regional conflicts. Jonathan Fowler, Director of Communications at the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, says conditions in Gaza remain extremely severe, with limited aid reaching civilians and growing concerns over violations of international humanitarian law.
One of the challenges in terms of the news cycle is that there is a lot of attention on what's happening in Iran, there's attention on what's happening in Lebanon, and as a result there's much less attention on what is happening in Gaza and indeed in the West Bank. The big challenge for the Gaza Strip is this is an unprecedentedly serious humanitarian crisis. People are only surviving because of humanitarian aid, but not enough humanitarian aid is being allowed in. There's an expectation, I think, that the international system functions as it should do. Now, there is international humanitarian law. Over and over in the Gaza Strip, we have seen a blatant disregard for international humanitarian law, the protection of civilians, the possibility for medical systems to function, the fact that hundreds of aid workers have been killed, including almost 400 of my own colleagues from the United Nations. That has never happened in the entire history of the United Nations. So the expectation is that international law will be respected. Sadly, we see that that is not happening.
Uzbekistan is advancing both energy security and environmental sustainability with new oil and gas projects on the Ustyurt Plateau alongside expanded greening efforts under the Yeşil Makon program. Here's more.
Uzbekistan is strengthening its energy sector through new international partnerships as British company BP joins efforts to develop hydrocarbon resources on the Ustyurt Plateau. According to Uzbekneftgaz, work is underway to maximize output at existing fields while accelerating geological exploration. The government has also engaged major international firms such as Boston Consulting Group and Schlumberger to introduce advanced technologies into the sector. Projects on the Ustyurt Plateau are being implemented in cooperation with Azerbaijan's SOCAR and could attract up to $2 billion in investment. The site is estimated to hold up to 100 million tons of oil and 35 billion cubic meters of natural gas, with annual production expected to reach 5 million tons of oil. First extraction is projected within the next 3 to 5 years as infrastructure development continues. At the same time, Uzbekistan is scaling up its environmental agenda under the nationwide Yashil Makon program. A new presidential decree sets a target to increase green coverage from 14.2 to 30% by 2030, while expanding green space per capita to 10 square meters. Air pollution levels, including PM2.5 and PM10 particles, are expected to decrease by 20 to 25%. And temperature in climate-affected regions could drop by up to 2 degrees Celsius. By 2028, at least 100 hectares of botanical and dendrological gardens will be created across the country. In addition, new mechanisms such as a green ticket system will allow individuals and businesses to offset carbon emissions, with strengths directed toward tree planting and maintenance. Officials claim the combined approach reflects broader strategy, expanding energy production to support economic growth, while simultaneously investing in environmental measures to mitigate its long-term impact. It is Cyril Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates.